Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good night. Welcome to another edition of our Dailyish Devotionals. I am Pastor Brian, and we are going to try one here on Tuesday. Squeeze one in this week. If you don't want to hear a little whining from the pastor here about how busy life is, then you better skip forward to a minute and a half maybe this video. We should be done with our whining by then. I don't know how many I'll get in this week. I've got midterms this week with school, and then I've got a couple funerals that I had to do this week. So this has kind of got pushed to the side a little bit, but I wanted to get at least one in while I had some time, and maybe we'll get another one in towards the end of the week. But just know I haven't forgot about doing them. I will get them in. I just, of course, it always comes at once. They can't spread out those. The responsibilities. It always comes a week when there's tests or something. I also have a paper I need to write. So is that enough excuses why I didn't get 3 or 4 of them in this week? I hope so. Okay. Oh, they're not back yet. We got to kill another 15 seconds for those that skip forward to a minute and a half. It's okay. They're not going to miss anything. I don't know if I'll keep doing the 80s theme yet, but when I typed in 80s movies, it came up with Spaceballs. And if you have a dry sense of humor, a slapstick comedy sense of humor, then you'll love this movie. If you're like Tracy and don't like any of that, then you're going to hate this movie. And I like this mashup poster of it. I thought that was kind of funny. And then, of course, the biblical pun cartoon. We haven't run out of them yet, much to your enjoyment, I am sure. But we'll see how the 80s themes go. I don't know how it's going to fit with our discussion here for these next few times, but we might not be able to discuss these heavy topics with the theme in the background, but maybe that different theme will be just what we need it is. So there we got Princess Vespa, I believe, and Barf, the loyal Mog, half man, half dog, and I can't remember what it is, Lone Star is his name, that's right, Lone Star. Rick Moranis's Dark Helmet or Darth Helmet. I don't remember for sure what his name is. It's obviously a Star Wars parody, but it's funny. As you can see, our little quote on the side there, most people are willing to take the Sermon on the Mount as a flag to sail under, but few will use it as a rudder by which to steer. We're going to talk about that a little bit. I got the new book. It says, What If Jesus Was Serious? I'm sure you probably can't see it from where you're at there, but it's by Sky Jethani. I believe that's his name. And he's going to take a serious look at the Sermon on the Mount. So I want to give you a little bit of an overview of what we're going to be doing this week, these few times. It will be a little bit heavier, may not be the right term. I think it's going to challenge us a little bit to see how we read the Bible. Do we do it critically? Do we do it actually to change us and to make suggestions, or do we just do it and kind of just brush it off as we do? How seriously we take it? So I think this will be good. His question on the back says, if Jesus was serious, then why don't we take him more seriously? Compare Jesus' teachings to a quick survey of how Christians live, and one thing becomes apparent. We often ignore much of what he says. What if Jesus was serious illustrates how we may explain away elements of his crucial sermon to stay comfortable and justify disobedience. We're going to concentrate on the Sermon on the Mount. And that is found in, we're going to start with Matthew, his version of it looks like, the Sermon on the Mount. So we'll start there, Matthew 5, 1 through 12. If you want to read ahead for the next time we do this. Which could be this week, which could be next week. We'll see how it goes. But Sky brings up in the book here, it says, today, fewer people identify as Christian. Fewer attend church with any regularity, and the fastest growing religious group in the United States is the nuns. N-O-N-E-S. Those who with no religious affiliation. And of course, he goes on to say that there are some Christians who once felt welcomed and accepted by the culture now feel pushed to the edges. And the response has been to cry persecution, that it's a war on faith, and that we need to take back the country for Jesus, he would say. These embattled believers sometimes assemble into political platoons to fight the culture war with the goal of retaking the land for Jesus. And other people say, well, if you just relax, hold your faith more loosely, let popular values override biblical ones, and then we'd find more acceptance in the culture. So you kind of got the two ends there. Either we need more Jesus, more rules, and listen to what Jesus taught, whatever that may be, or less, loosen it up would be a different option there too. So he goes on to say that what if the underlying malady affecting Christians today isn't that we take Jesus too seriously, but that we fail to take him serious enough? He asked the class that he taught on the Sermon on the Mount, how many of you think Jesus actually expects us to live out these commands? If you read the Sermon on the Mount, it's pretty tough. He says, no one raises hands. And he says, well, why shouldn't we take the Sermon on the Mount seriously? The response was, because it's impossible to obey. No one can live like this. Jesus was just showing us how we all need God's grace. He was illustrating what a perfect life looks like and how none of us can attain it. In their view, Jesus is preaching the Sermon on the Mount while he's winking at his disciples, saying, I don't take any of this stuff real seriously. Of course, he ends the Sermon on the Mount with a warning and a story about the perils of not obeying his words. We tend to think we can follow Jesus' teachings up to a point, usually when it gets too uncomfortable or too difficult. And then he's just talking in hyperbole and doesn't really expect us to do that. It's just what the perfect life would look like, but we don't need to worry about getting there. Jesus' commands aren't practical. If we took him seriously, people would walk all over us, people say. Loving your enemies, turning the other cheek, giving to anyone who asks is foolish. It's no way to get ahead, let alone survive in a dangerous world. Was Jesus the fool then for following the ideas himself? After all, loving his enemies got put on a Roman cross. We don't want to call Jesus a fool, but we don't want to say his teachings are important for us to follow either. Maybe I shouldn't go that far. So we believe we can follow his teachings, but we sure like to follow those grace and love and help your neighbor part. As long as the neighbor looks like me, as long as the grace is given to me and I don't have to give it to others, as long as I'm not required to do too much. On Sunday, contemporary Christians are eager to worship a crucified Savior who loved and forgave his enemies. But on Monday, we want permission to behave like the schoolyard bully who will use his fear and anger to get ahead. Our society is hungry for precisely the kind of integrity, gentleness, kindness, and love Jesus reveals in his sermon. We who claim to be Jesus' followers and seek a life shaped by his kingdom hold the antidote to the division and anger that is poisoning our culture. We hold the antidote that is poisoning and dividing our culture. The integrity, gentleness, kindness, and love that Jesus reveals in his sermon. The question is, how far are we going to go willing to live it? If this intrigues you, we're going to talk about it for the next couple weeks. I don't know how long it takes to get through this book. If it doesn't intrigue you, well, listen, come check out the cartoons, the backgrounds, and then check out after that. I think it's okay to be challenged just a little bit about our challenge life. Most of us are pretty comfortable. Maybe a little bit of a deeper look at our spiritual life wouldn't be a bad idea. I hope you do join me. Maybe we'll see you tomorrow, the next day, but we'll definitely see you again. Amen.